Hello readers, welcome back to Read Wuthering Bee, and today we will be continuing on with our read of Oliver Twist. We are on chapter 26, and I'll only be doing one chapter today because, as you can see, I am alone because Rob had other things to do. So, let's get to it. Chapter 26, in which a mysterious character appears upon the scene, and many things inseparable from this history are done and performed. The old man had gained the street corner before he had begun to recover from the effect of Toby Crackett's intelligence. He had relaxed nothing of his unusual speed, but still pressing onward in the same wild and disordered manner, when suddenly, dashing past of a carriage, and the boisterous cry of a foot passenger saw his danger, drove him back upon the pavement, avoiding, as much as possible, all the main streets, and skulking only through the byways and alleys. He at length emerged onto Snow Hill. Here he walked even faster than before, nor did he linger until he had again turned into a court, when, as if conscious that he was now in his proper element, he fell into his usual shuffling pace, and seemed to breathe more freely. Near to the spot on which Snow Hill and Holborn Hill met there opens, upon the right hand as you come out of the city, a narrow and dismal alley leading into Saffron Hill. Its filthy shops are exposed for sale, huge bunches of second-hand silk handkerchiefs of all sizes and patterns, for here reside the traders who purchase them from the pickpockets. Hundreds of these handkerchiefs hung dangling from pegs outside the windows, or flaunting from doorposts, and shelves within are piled with them. Confined within the limits of Field Lane it has its barber shop, its coffee shop, its beer shop, and its fried fish warehouse. It is a commercial colony of itself, an emporium of petty larceny. Visited at early morning and in the setting in of dusk by silent merchants who traffic in dark back parlours, and who go as strangely as they come. Here the clothesman, the shoe vamper, the rag merchant display their goods as signboards to the petty thief. Here the old stores of iron and bones, heaps of mildewy fragments of woolen stuff and linen, and rust and rot, all in grimy cellars. It was into this place that the Jew turned. He was well known to the sallow denizens of the lane, for such of them as were on the outlook to buy or sell nodded familiarly as he passed along. He replied to their salutations in the same way, but bestowed no closer recognition until he reached the far end of the alley, when he stopped to address the salesman of small stature who had squeezed as much of his person into a child's chair as the chair would hold, and was smoking a pipe at his warehouse door. "Why, the sight of you, Mr. Fagin, would cure Hoplamy," said the respectable trader, in acknowledgment to the Jew's inquiry after his health. "The neighbourhood is a little too hot and lively," said Fagin, elevating his eyebrows and crossing his hands upon his shoulders. "Well, I've heard complaint of it once or twice before," replied the trader, "but it soon cools down again. Don't you find it so?" Fagin nodded in the affirmative, pointing in the direction of Saffron Hill, and inquired whether anyone was up yonder tonight. "Ah, the cripples?" inquired the man. The Jew nodded. "Let me see," pursued the merchant, reflecting. "Yes, some half a dozen of 'em gone in, and that I knows. I don't think your friend's there." "Sikes is not, I suppose?" inquired the Jew, with a disappointed countenance. "Non instuits, as the lawyers say," replied the little man, shaking his head and looking amazingly sly. "Have you got anything in my line tonight?" "Not tonight," said the Jew, turning away. "Are you going up with the cripples, Fagin?" cried the little man, calling after him. "Stop! I don't mind if you have a drop there with you." But as the Jew, looking back, waved his hand to intimate that he preferred to being alone, and moreover the little man could not easily disengage himself from the chair, the sign of the cripples was for a time bereft of the advantage of Mr. Lively's presence. By the time he had got upon his legs, the Jew had disappeared, and so Mr. Lively, after ineffectually standing on tiptoe in hope of catching sight of him, again forced himself into the little chair, and, exchanging a shake of the head with a lady in the opposite shop, in which doubt and mistrust were plainly mingled, resumed his pipe and grave demeanour. The three cripples, or rather the cripples, which was the sign by which the establishment was familiarly known to its patrons, was the same public house in which Mr. Sikes and his dog had already figured. Merely making a sign to the man at the bar, Fagin went straight upstairs, and opening the door of the room, and softly insinuating himself inside the chamber, looked anxiously about, shading his eyes with his hand, as if in search of some particular person. The room was illuminated by two glass lights, the glare of which was prevented by the barrel shutters and the closely drawn curtains of faded red from being visible outside. The ceiling was blackened to prevent its colour from being injured by the flaring lamps, and the place was so full of dense tobacco smoke that at first it was scarcely possible to discern anything more. By degrees, however, some of it cleared away through the open door, and assemblages of heads, as confused noises that greeted the ear, might be made out. As the eye grew more accustomed to the scene, the spectator gradually became aware of the presence of numerous company, both male and female, crowded around a long table, at the upper end of which sat a chairman with a hammer of office, and in his hand, while a professional gentleman, with a bluish nose, and his face tied up for the benefit of a toothache, presided at a jingling piano in a remote corner. As Fagin stepped in softly, the professional gentleman, running over the keys by way of a prelude, occasioned a general cry of order of a song, having which subsided, the young lady proceeded to entertain the company with a ballad in 4 verses, between each which the accompanist played the melody, all through as loudly as he could. When this was over, the chairman gave a sentiment, after which the professional gentleman on the chairman's right and left volunteered a duet and sang it with great applause. It was curious to observe some of the faces which stood out prominently from among the group. There was the chairman himself, the landlord of the house, a coarse, rough, heavy-built fellow, who, while the songs were proceeding, rolled his eyes hither and thither, and, seeming to give himself up to joviality, had an eye for everything that was done, and an ear for everything that was said, sharp ones too. Near him were the singers, receiving with professional indifference the compliments of the company, and applying themselves in turn to a dozen proffered glasses of spirits and water, tendered by their more boisterous admirers, whose countenances, most expressive of almost every vice and almost every grade, irresistibly attracted to the attention by the very repulsiveness. Cunning, ferocity, and drunkenness in all its stages were there, in their strongest aspects. The women, and some with the lingering tinge of their early freshness, almost faded as he looked, and others with every mark and stamp of their sex utterly beaten out, and presenting but one loathsome blank prolificacy of crime, some mere girls, but others young women, and none of them past the prime of life, formed the darkest and saddest portion of this dreary picture. Fagin, troubled by no grave emotions, looked eagerly from face to face while these proceedings were in progress, but apparently without meeting that which he was in search of. Succeeding at length in catching the eye of the man who occupied the chair, he beckoned to him slightly, and left the room as quietly as he had entered it. "What can I do for you, Mr. Fagin?" inquired the man, as he followed him out onto the landing. "Won't you join us? They'll be delighted, every one of them." The Jew shook his head impatiently, and said in a whisper, "Is he here?" No, replied the man. And no news of Barney? Inquired Fagin. None, replied the landlord of the Cripples, for it was he. He won't stir till it's all safe, depend on it. They're on the scent down there, and that if he moved, he'd blow up the thing at once. He's all right enough, Barney is, else I'd have heard of him. I'll pound that Barney's manging properly. Let him alone for that. Let him alone for that. Will he be here tonight? Asked the Jew, laying the same emphasis on the pronoun as before. Monks, you mean? Inquired the landlord, hesitating. Hush! Said the Jew. Yes! Certain, replied the man, drawing a gold pocket watch from his fob. I expected him here before now. If you'll wait 10 minutes, he'll be... No, said the Jew hastily, as though, however desirous he might be to see the person in question, he was nevertheless relieved by his absence. Tell him I came here to see him. Tell him he must come to me tonight. No, say tomorrow. As he is not here, tomorrow will be time enough. Good, said the man. Nothing more? Now, no, not a word, said the Jew, descending the stairs. I say, said the other, looking over the rails and speaking with a hoarse whisper. What a time this would be for a good sell. I've got Phil Barker here, so drunk that a boy might take him. But it's not Phil Barker's time, said the Jew, looking up. Phil has something more we can do before we can afford to part with him. So go back to the company, my dear, and tell them to lead merry lives while they last. Ha ha! The landlord reciprocated the old man's laugh and returned to his guest. No sooner than the Jew alone than his countenance resumed its former expression of anxiety and thought, and after a brief reflection he called a hackett cabriolet and bade the man drive forward to Bethnal Green. He dismissed him with some quarter of a mile of Mr. Sykes' residence, and performed a short remainder of the distance on foot. Now, muttered the Jew, as he knocked on the door, if there is any deep play here, I shall have it out of you, my girl, as cunning as you are. She was in her room, the woman said. Fagin crept softly up the stairs and entered it without any previous ceremony. The girl was alone, lying with her head upon the table and her hair straggling over it. She has been drinking, thought the Jew coolly, or perhaps she is only miserable. The man turned and closed the door as he made his reflection, and the noise thus occasioned the girl to rouse. She eyed his crafty face narrowly as she inquired as to whether there was any news, and listened to his recital of Toby Crackett's story. When it was concluded, she sank into her former attitude, but spoke not a word. She pushed the candle impatiently away once or twice, as she feverishly changed her position, and shuffled her feet upon the ground. But this was all. During this silence, the Jew looked restlessly about the room, as if to assure him there were no appearances of Sykes having covertly returned. Apparently unsatisfied with his inspection, he coughed once, twice, thrice, and made many efforts to open conversation, but the girl heeded him no more than if he had been made of stone. At length he made one more attempt, and rubbing his hands together, and said in his most conciliatory tone, "Where do you think Bill was now, my dear?" The girl moaned out some half-intelligible reply that she could not tell, and seemed, from the smothered noise that escaped her, to be crying. "And the boy, too?" said the Jew, straining his eyes to catch a glimpse of her face. "Poor leetle child, left in a ditch. That's only think." "The child," said the girl, suddenly looking up. "He is better where he is than among us. If no harm comes to Bill from it, I hope he lies dead in a ditch, that his young bones may rot there." "What?" cried the Jew in amazement. "Aye, I do," returned the girl, meeting his gaze. "I shall be glad to have him away from my eyes, and know the worst is over. I can't bear to have you tell me, and to have him about me. The sight of him turns me against myself, and all of you." "Pooh!" said the Jew scornfully. "You're drunk." "Am I?" said the girl bitterly. It's no fault of yours if I'm not. You'd never have me anything else if you had your will, except now. The humour doesn't suit you, does it?" "No," rejoined the Jew furiously, "it does not." "Change it, then," responded the girl with a laugh. "Change it!" exclaimed the Jew, exasperated by all bounds by his companion's unexpected obstinacy and vexation of the night. "I will change it. Listen to me, you drab. Listen, who, with 6 words, can strangle Sikes as surely as if I had the bull's throat between my fingers now. If he comes back and leaves the boy behind him, if he gets off free and dead or alive, if he fails to restore him to me, murder him yourself, if you would, and have him escape Jack Ketch. And do it the moment he sets foot in the room, or, mind me, it will be too late." "What's all this?" cried the girl involuntarily. "What's all this?" pursued Fagin, mad with rage. "When a boy's worth hundreds of pounds to me, am I to lose the chance through me in a way of getting safely through the whims of a drunken gang that I could whistle away the lives of, and bound to me to a born devil that only wants what the will wants, and has the power to Panting for breath, the old man stammered for a word, and in an instant checked the torrent of his wrath, and changed his whole demeanour. A moment before, his clenched hands grasped the air, his eyes dilated, his face had grown livid with passion. But now he had shrunk into a chair, and cowering together, trembled with the apprehension of having to disclose himself some hidden villainy. After a short silence, he ventured to look around at his companion, and appeared somewhat reassured on beholding her in the same listless attitude from which he had first aroused her. "Nancy, dear," croaked the Jew in his usual voice, "did you mind me, dear?" Don't worry me now, Fagin," replied the girl, raising her head languidly. "If Bill has not done it this time, he will another. He has done a good many jobs for you, and will do a good many more if he can. When he can't, he won't, so no more's about that." "Regarding this boy, my dear," said the Jew, rubbing his palms together nervously. "The boy must take his chance with the rest," interrupted Nancy hastily. "And I say again, I hope he's dead and out of harm's way, and out of yours, that is, if Bill comes to no harm, and if Toby gets off clear. He's pretty sure to be safe, for he's worth 2 of him any time." "About what I was saying, my dear," observed the Jew, and keeping his glistening eyes steady upon her. "You must say it all over again if it's anything you want me to do," rejoined Nancy, "and if it's not, you had better wait until tomorrow. You put me up for a minute, and now I'm stupid again." Fagin put several other questions, all with the same drift of uncertainty whether the girl had profited by his unguarded hints, but she had answered them so readily, and withal so utterly unmoved by his searching looks, and his original impression of her being more than a trifle in the liquor was fully confirmed. Nancy, indeed, was not exempt from a failing which was very common among the Jew's female pupils, in which, in their tender years, they were rather encouraged than checked. Her disordered appearance, and the wholesale perfume of Geneva which had pervaded the apartment, afforded a strong confirmity of the evidence of the justice of the Jew's supposition, and when, after an indulged and intemporary display of violence above described, she had subsided, first into dullness, and then afterwards into compounded feelings, under the influence which she shed tears one minute, and next gave utterance to various exclamations of "never say die," and divers calculations as to what might be the odds of so long as a lady or gentleman was happy. Mr. Fagin, who was considerably experienced of such matters in his time, saw, with great satisfaction, that she was very far gone indeed. Having his mind eased by this discovery, and having accomplished his twofold objective of imparting to the girl what he had heard that night, and ascertaining with his own 2 eyes that Sikes had not returned, Mr. Fagin again turned his face homeward, leaving his young friend asleep with her head upon the table. It was within an hour of midnight, and the weather being dark and piercing cold, he had no great temptation to loiter. The sharp wind that scoured the streets seemed to have cleared them of passengers, as of dust and mud, for few people were abroad, and they were, to all appearances, hastening fast home. It blew right up the quarter for the Jew, however, and sent it and straight out before it he went, trembling and shivering as every fresh gust drove him rudely on his way. As he reached the corner of his own street, he was already fumbling in his pocket for the door key, when a dark figure emerged from a projecting entrance, which lay in deep shadow, and crossing the road and glided up to him unperceived. "Fagin!" whispered a voice close to his ear. "Ah," said the Jew, turning quickly round. "Is that—" "Yes!" Interrupted the stranger harshly. "I've been lingering here these 2 hours. Where in the devil have you been?" "On your business, my dear," replied the Jew, glancing up uneasily at his companion, and slackening his pace as he spoke. "On your business all night." "Oh, of course," said the stranger with a sneer. "And what's come of it?" "Nothing good," said the Jew. "Nothing bad, I hope," said the stranger, stopping short and turning a startled look on his companion. The Jew shook his head and was about to reply when the stranger interrupted him, motioned to the house, before which they had by this time arrived, remarking that he had better say what he had got to say under cover, for his blood was chilled with standing about so long, and the wind was blowing through him. Fagin looked as if he could have willingly excused himself from taking the visitor home at such an unseasonable hour, and indeed muttered something about having no fire, but his companion repeated the request in a premature manner. He unlocked the door and requested him to close it softly while he got a light. "It's as dark as the grave," said the man, groping a few footsteps forward. "Make haste." "Shut the door," whispered Fagin, from the end of the passage as he spoke, and closed it with a loud noise. "That wasn't my doing," said the other man, feeling his way. "The wind must have blew it, or shut it of his own accord. One or the other. Look sharp with the light, or I shall knock my brains out against something in this confounded hole." Fagin stealthily descended to the kitchen stairs. After a short absence he returned with a lighted candle, and the intelligence that Toby Crackit was asleep in the room below, and the boys in the front one. Beckoning the man to follow him, he led the way upstairs. "We can say a few words we've got to say here, my dear," said the Jew, throwing the door open to the first floor. "And there are holes in the shutters, and we never show lights to our neighbours. We'll set the candle on the stairs. There." With these words, the Jew, stooping down, placed the candle on the upper flight of stairs, exactly opposite the room door. This done, he led the way into the apartment, which is destitute of all movables save a broken armchair, and an old couch or sofa without covering, which stood behind the door. Upon this piece of furniture the stranger flung himself, with the air of a weary man, and the Jew, drawing up the armchair opposite, they sat face to face. It was not quite dark, for the door was partially open, and the candle outside threw a feeble reflection on the opposite wall. They conversed in whispers for some time, though nothing of the conversation was distinguishable below, a few disjointed words here and there. The listener might have easily perceived that Fagin appeared to be defending himself against some remarks of the stranger, and that the latter was in a state of considerable irritation. They might have been talking thus for a quarter of an hour or more, when Monks, by which the name the Jew had designated the strange man several times in the course of their colloquy, said, raising his voice a little, "I tell you again, it was badly planned. Why have you not kept him here among the rest, and made a sneaking, snivelling pickpocket of him at once?" "Only hear him!" exclaimed the Jew, shrugging his shoulders. Why do you mean to say I couldn't have done it if you had chosen?" demanded Monks sternly. "Haven't you done it with other boys scores of times? If you'd had the patience for a 12-month at most, you could have gotten him convicted and safely sent out of the kingdom, perhaps for life." "And whose turn would that have served, my dear?" inquired the Jew humbly. "Mine," replied Monks. "But not mine," said the Jew submissively. "He might have become of use to me when there when there are two parties in a bargain, it is only reasonable that the interests of both should be consulted. Isn't it, my good friend? Then what? I saw that it was not easy to train him in the business, replied the Jew. He was not like other boys in the same circumstances. Curse him, no, muttered the man, or he would have been a thief long ago. I had no hold upon him to make him worse, pursued the Jew, anxiously watching the countenance of his companion. His hand was not in mine. I had nothing to frighten him with, which we must always have in the beginning, or we labour in vain. So what could I do? Send him out with Dodger and Charlie. We had enough of that at first, my dear. I trembled for all of us. That was not my doing, observed Monks. No, my dear, renewed the Jew, and I don't quarrel with it now, because if it had never happened, you would never have kept eyes upon the boy to notice him, and so led to the discovery that it was him you were looking for. Well, I got him back for you by means of the girl, and she begins to favour him. Throttle the girl, said Monks impatiently. Why, we can't afford to do that just now, my dear, replied the Jew, smiling, and besides, that sort of thing is not in our way, or one of these days I might be glad to have done it. I know what these girls are, Monks, as well. As soon as the boy begins to harden, she'll care no more for him than a block of wood. You want him made a thief. If he is alive, I can make him one from this time. And if, said the Jew, drawing nearer to the other, it's not likely, mind, but if the worst comes to the worst, and he's dead, it's no fault of mine if he is, interposed the other man, with a look of terror, and clasping the Jew's arm with trembling hands. Mind that, Fagin, I had no hand in it. Anything but his death, I told you from the first. I won't shed blood. It's always bound down and haunts a man besides. If they shot him dead, I was not the cause. Do you hear me? Fire this infernal den. What's that? What? Cried the Jew, grasping the coward round the body with both arms, and sprung to his feet. Where? Yonder, replied the man, glaring at the opposite wall. The shadow. I saw a shadow of a woman, and a cloak and bonnet pass along like a wainscot like a breath. The Jew released his hold, and they rushed tumultuously from the room. The candle, wasted by the draught, was standing there where it had been placed. It showed them only the empty staircase and their own white faces. They listened intently, but profound silence reigned throughout the house. It's your fancy, said the Jew, taking up the light and turning to his companions. I'll swear I saw it, replied Monks, trembling. It was bending forward when I first saw it, and when I spoke it darted away. The Jew glanced contemptuously at the pale face of his associate, and telling him he could follow if he pleased, and ascended the stairs. They looked into all the rooms. They were cold, bare, and empty. They descended into the passage, and thence into the cellars below. The green damp hung upon the low walls, and tracks of snails and slugs glistened in the light of the candle, but all was as still as death. What do you think now? Said the Jew, when they had regained the passage. Besides ourselves, there's not a creature in the house except for Toby and the boys, and they're safe enough. See here. As proof of that fact, the Jew drew forth 2 keys from his pocket, and explained that when he first went downstairs he locked them in, to prevent any intrusion on the conference. This accumulated testimony effectually staggered Mr. Monks. His protestations had gradually become less and less vehement as they proceeded in their search without making any discovery, and now he gave vent to several grim laughs as he confessed it must only have been his excited imagination. He declined any renewal of the conversation, however, for that night, and suddenly remembering that it was past 1 o'clock, and so amiable, the couple departed. And that is where we leave our story for now. I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you again next time. Stay safe, be excellent, and keep reading. Bye for now, readers.